Hey, I'm Nate, and this is New Compass Collectibles. Welcome to another auction analysis video. We're going to be looking at January ComicLink auction data, and I've got some new charts today, some new types of analysis. I think it gives us the most in-depth, comprehensive analysis of auction data that I've ever seen to date. So I'm very excited to share that with you, and let's go ahead and get into it. So as I said, we're going to be looking at ComicLink auction data from January and February 2025. These auction results closed at the end of January and beginning of February. I've got a lot of cool new plots and new analysis that I think gives us a lot of good insight into how this auction performed, how it compares to market history, and what the trends are showing in terms of recent auction results. So very happy to talk about that today. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the analysis, and go ahead and get started with this data today. Just auction totals. This one I usually show at the beginning just to give a highlight of what the auction looked like overall. We're looking at close to $2 million in sales and spread across four different sessions. 1A being the most premium high value books, a little under $5,000 per sale average in that session. The rest of the sessions, 1B through session 4 have a lot of items, but the average value is much lower. Session 1A has most of the premium content. Auction totals in session 1A were close to $700,000. Session 1B is close to $600,000. And then session 3 has about $300,000 in sales, but spread over 2,000 books, so an average price of just $130 per book. Session 2 is the Golden Age books, so those had an average selling price that was a little bit higher with $365 per sale and just 400 sales in that category. Breaking this data down by comic age, we have Golden Age, Silver, Bronze, Modern Age. Silver, Bronze, and Modern, a very similar number of sales in each of those ages. The highest sale per book on the right-hand side of the screen was actually in the Platinum Age, so just 3 sales there, but $300 per sale. Golden Age books, $270 on average per book over, combining the sales from all the sessions. And, Silver, Bronze, and Modern, only about $100, a little under $100 per sale for Bronze and Modern books. That's why I just look at the totals for a lot of the auction sessions. The sessions 1 and 2, 1A, 1B, and 2 have the most interesting books usually. Sessions 3 and 4 have a lot of lower dollar value items, so I don't focus on those as much other than to present the totals. But this next chart is what I'm actually really excited to share today because we have a new look at the data. And I'll explain this since it's the first time I'm showing it. But this is showing all of the auction results compared to their most recent sale. So any books that sold in this auction, if they had a sale at the same grade for that book in the last 12 months, I'm comparing the most recent sale to the sale in this auction. Sales that are marked above the dotted line mean that they sold for more than their most recent comparable sale. Sales below the dotted line mean that they sold for less than the most recent comparable sale. So you can see in session 1A, the summary here, we have 88 sales in session 1A that had some type of sale in the last 12 months that I could do a comparison on. So we have 88 sales plotted here. The average result was a minus 5.53%. So the average sale in this auction for session 1A went 5% under its most recent sale in the last 12 months, which shows you that we're still in a downtrending market. There are a lot of sales here that are close to that dotted line, but just slightly below. Some, of course, that went above the dotted line, so higher than a most recent sale. So some strong sales out there. But looking at any individual sale, it's hard to get a feel for what the market is doing. You could have a lot of different reasons that one book might sell a little bit higher or lower in one auction compared to the next. But when you're looking at a large number of data points like this and being able to visualize them all at once, looking at the averages, it starts to paint a more clear picture that gives us some confidence in its estimate of what the market is doing. This next chart is also a new way of looking at the data. So what this is showing is what would the value of this auction catalog have been if it had sold at any point over the previous 5 years. So taking all of the books that were sold in session 1A of this auction and looking at the most recent sales of those books over time, what would that auction catalog have been worth in 2020, in 2021, etc. So this is all based on real auction history, real sales data that I've collected and have kind of compiled here. It takes a lot of work, but this gives us some idea of how the values of these books have changed over time. The values from this auction, like the actual sales in this auction, are marked with that pink dot on the right-hand side of the screen. The vertical line just indicating the date of the auctions that we're talking about. And the rest of that plot over time, over the last 5 years, is compiling the value of all these books at the time based on recent sales. So what were the values historically of these same books over the last 5 years? So if we go back to 2020, where this plot starts, these same books would have been valued at a little over $400,000. If you fast forward to 2022, at the peak of the comic boom here, these same books would have been worth a little over $800,000. So at their peak value, they would have gone up a little over 100%, from 2020 to 2022. Now those same books have sold for close to $450,000, $460,000. So almost all the way back to the values at the 2020 time frame. So we've corrected most of the way back down, but still are a little bit higher than what they would have been valued at in 2020. So we've maintained some of the gains, but we've really corrected a lot of the excesses from the 2021-2022 boom. We're going to go ahead and look at that same pair of plots for session 1B and session 2 and other sessions in this auction. So session 1B, the correction was actually a bit more, with an average auction result of 9% below the most recent sale. So again, you can see a lot of these dots below the dotted line, which means that a lot of these sales in this auction were below the most recent comparable sale, and some dots were above the dotted line, so strong sales there. But on average, with 614 comparisons here being plotted, the average result is a minus 9.35%. So that's in just the last year, close to a 10% correction for most of these books. And similarly, we look at the sales plotted over time, or the auction catalog value plotted over time. The pink dot is below the trend, so you can see these were weak sales compared to this catalog's value, even below the 2020 values. So we're actually correcting not just all of the gains from the 2021, 2022 boom here, but we're actually even below the starting point. Session 2 books, now reminder that this is Golden Age books only, so Session 2 is all Golden Age books. That's why we only have 34 comps. Golden Age books don't sell as often, so there are more than 34 books in Session 2, but there are only 34 books that we have comparable sales within the last 12 months. So here we're showing those 34 comparisons, and on average, the result was a 6.15% decrease in this auction. So again, lower sales compared to comparable auction results in the last year. The value of the Golden Age catalog has been a little more stable, because the books don't sell as often. You don't get to see all the spikes in value because maybe we don't have recorded sales that really reflect the market over time as accurately as we do on, say, a Bronze Age book or a Modern Age book. Just the number of transactions here, you don't get the insight that you would necessarily in the other markets. But compared to 2020, we are above 2020 values for this grouping of books, and still below the peaks, but not correcting as hard as the Silver and Bronze Age and modern markets. Now moving on to some of the strongest sales that we've seen in this auction. So even though the sales were generally 5 to 10% below comparable sales, that doesn't mean there weren't strong sales in the auction too. So I pulled out a few to highlight. Speed Comics number 24, there was a 4.5 grade copy. It sold for $2,100, and that's compared to a $1,200 sale in the last 12 months. So that's a 75% increase. That's a big sale for that book. Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 1 is a surprising one to see on this list because this is something that does come on the market fairly often. So you wouldn't expect to see a lot of volatility in the sales data there. But selling for $3,000 in this auction compared to $2,000 sale in the last 12 months, that's a 47% increase. X-Men number 120, this is a 9.8. So not as often that you see this one on the list. You don't see the 9.8 sell as regularly, and this one sold for $3,600 compared to $2,760 as a most recent sale, and that's a 30% increase. The next one is a Amazing Spider-Man number 28. So this 8.0 sold for $1,751 in this auction. That's compared to a $1,020 sale in the last 12 months, and a 72% increase there. Next, we have some week sales. Now, there were more week sales for me to pick from, but I just chose a few here to highlight, really in no particular order, but just some ones that I found that I thought were interesting. There was a Secret Wars number 8 and a 9.9. Now, this was a huge correction. So 9.9s, the value is declining a bit as we've seen more 9.9s get graded by CGC. So there was a sale in the last 12 months for a $10,800 9.9, and in this auction selling for $5,655. That's almost a 50% decrease compared to the most recent sale. There was a Marvel Spotlight number 1 and a 9.8 that sold for $2,169. That's down 44% from a recent $3,840 sale. And another big book here is Marvel Spotlight number 5. This is a huge book, $24,188 for a 9.6, selling 37% below its recent sale of $38,400. Fantastic Four number 59. This isn't a 9.8, another one that you don't see that often, but $2,202, much lower, 35% lower than the $3,360 sale. And finally, we have one Golden Age book on this list, Weird Science number 5, and a 7.0 selling for $460, which is pretty low compared to a $1,020 sale, a 55% drop compared to that most recent sale. So those are all the comparative sales that I wanted to look at, which I do find the comparative sale data more interesting, but I also want to highlight some of the top sales of each age in this auction as well. This is something that I've presented at previous videos, so I just wanted to keep this going for now. But I didn't bother looking up the recent prices for all of these books. I just wanted to highlight some of the biggest sales that we saw in the modern, bronze, silver, and golden age. These are the top 5 books from each category. A lot of these are books that we see pretty often in these top 5 lists. The Ultimate Fallout 4 variant edition selling for $9,300 in a 9.8. That's higher than some recent sales that we've seen, I think, just based on memory. Again, we have the Secret Wars 8 and a 9.9 coming in on this list. It was a big drop compared to a recent sale, but still makes the top 5 here. One thing that was interesting on the Bronze Age list here is Werewolf by Night number 1. It was a 9.8, but it was also a signed copy by Stan Lee, and there was a comment in the book addressing the signature to Mark Plug, who was the cover artist of that book. So it indicates that this was probably a Stan Lee signed copy for Mark Plug's personal collection. So that's kind of an interesting book there. And a 9.8 selling for $12,069. It's the only signed 9.8 on the Werewolf by Night number 1 census. So really cool book there. In the Golden Age, it's actually interesting to see Superboy at the top of the list. Usually not surprised if we see Superman, but Superboy, I think it's the first time I've seen be the top-selling Golden Age book. An 8.0 of Superboy number 1 selling for $7,911. All right, I'm going to go through quickly and just highlight some of the sales in those top 5 lists that we just looked at. So in the modern age, we have this Amazing Spider-Man 300. As I said, this was signed by Todd McFarlane, so a 9.8 selling there. The 4th highest sale in the modern age was this Amazing Spider-Man 238. Now, this is a Canadian price variant. That's something I didn't notice when I was making the top 5 chart. So I actually think it's kind of cool the way that they did the label on this one. I don't usually like custom labels, but I think that one's kind of fun. And interesting to know that's the Canadian price variant. Makes sense why it would make the top of the list here. Number 3 is that 9.9 Secret Wars number 8. So not a lot of these in this high of a grade. So it's kind of interesting to see this one sell, but we know that it did have a pretty big drop compared to its most recent sale. The second highest sale in the modern age here is the Ultimate Fallout 4 Variant Edition. This one maybe has found a bottom because this price was a little bit higher than more recent sales. And then top of the list, no surprise, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the first print, selling here in a 7.0. And it does look like this was signed on the interior by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, although it doesn't get the signature series grade because it's on the inside. In the Bronze Age, this was kind of an interesting one to see. The fifth highest sale is Amazing Spider-Man #113. This is a 9.8, which you don't always see this cover making a lot of top lists, but in a 9.8, pretty good sale here for this one. The fourth highest sale being the Werewolf by Night #1, as I mentioned before. This was signed by Stan Lee, kind of a nice looking signature on this book, and then also on the inside it says Best of Luck Plug written on first page in marker, so it does indicate that this was a Stan Lee signed copy directly to the cover artist, Mike Plug. Next highest sale was a Marvel Spotlight #5. This was a 9.4, so a high grade book here, and a CVA sticker to boot. Next on the list was a Tomb of Dracula #10 and a 9.8. Again, a CVA sticker, so it doesn't really look like the pages are all square on this book, so it doesn't present as well to me, but a 9.8 selling here in this auction. And topping the list in the Bronze Age is this Marvel Spotlight #5 in a 9.6 grade. This is the one that did have a lower sale, but still enough to make the top of the list. This is a very high grade book for a tough black cover in the Bronze Age. 9.8s are extremely valuable. 9.6 also very hard, high grade in this book. Kicking off the Silver Age at #5 was Fantastic Four #1 in a 4.5. A lot of yellowing on this cover, so not my favorite copy, but enough to make the top 5 here. Fourth on the list was Amazing Fantasy 15 in a 3.5. Third highest sale is this Showcase #4, selling for $28,500 in a 6.0. Nice looking book here. The reds and oranges of this book do look fairly nice. Next is another Amazing Fantasy 15. This one's selling for $37,500. This is a 4.5 copy. And #1 in the Silver Age was a 7.0 of Fantastic Four #1, selling for just over $50,000. This one's got the date stamp here on the top left corner. So that's kind of a cool little artifact. I do like the date stamps. I know some people don't, but I think it's kind of neat to see what was, stamped from the time on the newsstands when this was actually put out for sale to the public for the first time, who really didn't know much about superheroes yet. This kicked off the superheroes for Marvel, and having the date stamp on it is, I think, kind of a fun little historic artifact. Looking at the Golden Age now, the fifth highest sales of Superman #3. This one's actually a conserved book, selling for $3,100. #4, we have a Marvel Mystery Comics #40, a low grade here and a 1.5. This is one of my favorite covers from this series. I'd love to pick one of these up at some point. Here, the cover is detached. There's a lot of damage to the cover, so not the best looking copy, but for 1.5, not that bad either. No big chunks taken out of it, and the cover is all intact. Third on the list is actually a CBCS book. I think it's the first one we've seen in the top 5 lists so far. Superman #2, selling in a 1.8 grade for just over $4,000. Second in the Golden Age, we have a Batman #11. Now this is a restored book, 6.0, and a nice looking copy, but restored. Obviously, it's not going to get quite as much of a high sale as a Universal book. And the #1 book in the Golden Age is the Superboy #1, in an 8.0, selling for just shy of $8,000. Switching back to our prepared material now, I'm going to finish this conversation by looking at some of the most sold titles from each of the different eras of comics here. I like to go over the number of sales by title over the entire auction, and Amazing Spider-Man is always at the top, but the rest of the list does change from time to time. So top selling books are Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and the X-Men. Breaking this down by age, the highest selling books in the modern age were Spawn and New Mutants, followed by Transformers. If we look at data from the Bronze Age in this auction, the highest selling books were Werewolf by Night and Star Wars. Looking at the Silver Age, the highest selling books here are Showcase, and then the Amazing Spider-Man annuals coming in second, and Action Comics being the third. And finally, in the Golden Age, we have the top-selling book being Superman. 8 sales for a Superman title in this auction for an average selling price of $958. Pretty much double the next highest selling book, which was Detective Comics with an average of $471 per sale, and Weird Science coming in third. So that's all the data from this auction. A lot of new analysis that I added to some of my summaries and auction breakdowns here. Let me know what you think of that new data, and if I could explain it better, or if it gives you some insights that you appreciate, then go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel, because I will continue doing these auction recaps in the future. And share the channel if you think there are others who would appreciate seeing this information as well. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you watching the video to the end, and I'll see you again next time.